All right. Well, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday morning, and I thought we would do a quick little devotional. So it is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I thought we would do just a little quick devotional on our mental health and moving us forward that way. And so I'll sit like this for a little bit, let people check in, and then we'll go from there. Good morning, Darlene. How are you? All right. We are going to look at a couple of verses and then we're going to talk about some things. The first one is Romans chapter 12 and verse 2. We know this one pretty well, I think, but let's talk about it and then we're going to jump over into Corinthians. So the verse for, I think, just to get us settled on a good verse for the whole, good morning, for the whole mental health kind of awareness month is the way in which we can protect our minds, we also protect our bodies and what comes out of us. And so in Romans 12:2 it says, "Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will." We need to renew our mind. And so whatever gets into our mind can kind of get to us. Good morning, Nan. How are you? And so in 2 Corinthians 10:3-5, it says, "Though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that set it, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ." And so, we need to keep this mindset of what comes into our heads, if we do not keep it captive and bring it before God, can actually do some damage to us if we're allowing ourselves to go to our own devices. And we kind of talked about that in our sermon last time, that we left on our own, we might make some really bad and poor choices. Left on our own, we'll do things that we want to do to satisfy us. And so we go back into those old ways, the ways that we were before we knew who Christ was. And so we are led by our sinful desires and our urges of our flesh. Instead, we need to control what's in our between our ears before it gets to our heart, so that we can act accordingly. So here's some things that we're going to do. One is, so if you're writing things down, if you're that kind of person, I'll let you get pen and paper. I have about 3 or 4 things that we can write down. So I was looking back in an old devotional book that we did in our life group. Man, it had to be about 5-6 years ago, and it's called Transformed by Rick Warren. So if you want to check that out, let me know. I have some things. The first step is, do not believe everything you think. We have this amazing ability to lie to ourselves, and we do it all the time. It's not anything new. Through our experiences and through the way that we've walked this earth up until the point that you are, your experiences have led you probably to internalize some things that aren't true, either about yourself or about other people. I sat in a training yesterday with about 60 people on a Zoom. So if you go to our Zoom class on Wednesday night, we usually have about 10-15 people. Can you imagine, like 60 people in a Zoom? It was crazy. But we were talking about anxiety in kids and everything, but we got to a point where it went to our own racial bias and how we treat other people based on experiences that we've had. And some of these biases are not necessarily all negative, but they're not true. So one of the ladies talked about her whole experience as an educator, as an African American woman in areas that were, her whole educational career, all of her friends or students that were with her that were Asian were really smart. And so as a teacher, she neglected to give help to those who are Asian because she thought, oh, they don't need my help, they'll just get it. Where on the reverse side of that is usually when teachers would see an African American student, they would think, oh, they're not going to be able to pass this class, they're not going to be able to handle it. And there's just this bias that is built up over time because we lie to ourselves with experiences that aren't always true, and we overgeneralize it to everybody or even within ourselves. And so the first thing is, don't believe everything you think, because we lie to ourselves. Excuse me, we lie to ourselves. And in Jeremiah 17:9, it talks about this too. It says, you and I have it says, the heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it? There's just things that we feel or we think that's just not true. and it takes us to kind of like lay it out there and look at it before we can act on it. In 2 Corinthians 13:5, it says, examine yourselves to see whether you are in the faith. Test yourselves. We need to like test the thoughts that we think and make sure that they are true and right. Good morning, whoever just joined us. I just saw you pop up. Welcome. Glad you're here. All right, the next one is guard your mind against garbage. We put so many things into our hearts or into our minds that are just not good for us. And I think, that saying that all of our moms had given us, or maybe someone in your life, garbage in, garbage out. So the more we feed ourselves junk, the more we're going to probably push that out. If you need an example of what that looks like, have you ever seen someone who kind of slowly started to fall away? They made this progression, like they stopped coming to church regularly, and then they stopped coming all together. And when they were there, they were active, and you started to see this change in them. And then when you stop seeing them and you kind of run into them somewhere, you notice their language change, their behavior changes, and things like that. We start to allow more in that is not good for us when we're giving room, when we're not allowing God the space in our hearts anymore. So when that starts to take place, he doesn't have room to operate in us because we're too busy filling ourselves up with junk. It says there's three types of brain food. There's toxic food, junk food, and healthy food. So sometimes we put into ourselves really bad, destructive things. Sometimes we just put in things that are just not healthy, but they're not completely damaging. It's like the Snickers bars of your mind. But then there's like, the superfoods that we need, the good and positive thoughts, the things that help us to see life in the way that God intended it to. And so we need to be aware of what we're putting in. In Psalms 101, verse 3, it says, I will not set before my eyes anything that is worthless. Like, what are we putting in front of us? Is it something that will benefit you, something that will grow you, something that will shape you in a good way? Or is it something that's going to be destructive and bring you down, or other people around you? And so I want us to think about, what are we putting in our lives, and is it worth putting in there? Is it beneficial, or is it going to be something that really, in the long run, we have to do the work to get it out? I always tell people it's a lot easier physically to keep yourself in shape than it is to put on a lot of weight and then try to lose it. And I think the same thing goes with our mind. It's a lot easier to keep yourself healthy, but the moment you go into these bad habits and you make these bad decisions and you're constantly getting down to something that becomes now routine, it's a lot harder to break the routine than it is to build up good things in your life. Okay, the next one, if you're writing things down, is never let up on knowledge. Never stop learning. The moment that we feel like we have it all figured out is the moment that we get stagnant and we can start to slide a little bit. So we always want to be pushing forward to learn more, especially about ourselves and in Christ. Like, what are we putting in that we're learning more and more about Him and who we are in Him will help benefit us. And so Proverbs 18:11, it says, intelligent people are always ready to learn. Their ears are always open for knowledge. We should always be ready and available to learn something new. If we go back to that Romans verse that says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. How do you renew your mind? How did you learn something when you were a kid? You had to, you had to read, you had to experience it, you had to, open it up and figure out the problems, and you're going to fail a little bit, but along the process, you're hopeful that I'm going to learn a new skill, I'm going to learn a new trait, and it's going to benefit me down the road. So we always want to be ready to learn. Another proverb in 10 verse 14, it says, wise people store up knowledge. I like to watch, this is maybe my guilty pleasure, I guess. I like to watch Jeopardy a lot. I think I've aged over the years. Now I enjoy sitting down and watching Jeopardy. But the people who do really well on that show are people who read a lot. And that was never my forte. I hated to read. I'm getting better because audiobooks are beautiful. But just the idea of sitting down and being still, for me, I think I have just too active of a mind that I had to build that discipline. And so, those who read and those who have a desire and heart for learning are wise people, and usually have good experiences in their lives to help others with. One more proverb, 19 verse 8, it says, it's wise to learn from experience. It's wiser to learn from the experience of others, and it is a lot less painful. I think this is one of the more truer statements ever. We could either look to the people who are in our lives that made those mistakes along the way and say, I don't want to do that. And some people, they have a hard time doing that. And so they feel like, oh, I have to, blaze my own path and I need to figure it out for myself. And usually they come back and they say, I really wish I would have listened. Now, this is one of those advices that we as parents give our kids, but we also got it from ours. And I can't point fingers here. I learned a lot of hard lessons on my own that I could have learned from other people because I saw the path that they went, and I could have easily avoided some of those things in my life. I may not have gone as deep down as some of those, but we can learn from the mistakes of others and make it a lot less painful in our lives than trying to do it on our own. Okay, the last one is renew your mind daily with. I'm gonna put two in this: scripture and prayer. Change doesn't start in our behavior, it starts in our thoughts. So the way in which we're going to renew our mind daily is we're going to learn to take our thoughts captive and bring them before the Lord. Well, how do you do that? I need to pause myself when I have these negative thoughts about things, or when I have something that I feel is maybe a lustful thought or a prideful thought or a greed thought or coveting thought or whatever, being envious of somebody else's things. I need to pause. And so maybe you need to put that into your repertoire and just say, I need to stop. I need to pause. I need to take a breath, and I need to bring this before God and say, is this a thought that comes from you, or is this something that comes from my own deceitful thinking? Romans 12:2 we just read, right? We can't copy behaviors of the world, but we need to be transformed. In Isaiah 26:3 it says this: you will keep in perfect peace all who trust in you, all whose thoughts are fixed on you. If we can keep our mind focused on bringing the things that come in and laying them at the feet of Jesus before we act on them, we will make a lot more wise decisions in our life. We'll probably avoid a lot more tragedy in our lives too. It doesn't mean that everything is going to be perfect, but you'll be able to handle the situations that come up because you know who's with you. You know who has gone before you. You know who is beside you, and you know that you are walking with the God, the creator of everything, who can get us through when we lean on him in the appropriate and right ways. I said that was the last one, but there is one more. I want us to allow God to stretch our dreams also of what we can do. I think we limit ourselves a lot, and so we're talking about emotional health here and goals that we want to set for ourselves, and where do we want to be, and where are we at currently. And I want you to allow yourself to dream a little bit with God and allow him to stretch you, to push you a little bit further. In Ephesians 3:20 and 21, it says, now glory be to God, who is in mighty power at work within us, is able to do far more than we could ever dare to ask or dream of, infinitely beyond your highest prayers, desires, thoughts, or hopes. May he be given glory forever. So now I remember this is a different version than the NIV. I remember this as now according to his power that is at work within us. Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we could ever ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us. It's a song, that's how I remember it. But we need to allow him to stretch us, to dream big, to know that God has the ability to give us more than we could ever ask or imagine. But you have to ask, and you have to also be focused and leaning on him. I think there's a pattern to these things that we've written down to get in order to go along with God. All right, Proverbs 29:18. Nothing happens until somebody starts dreaming. God cannot help you reach your goals if you do not have any goals. He cannot fulfill your dreams if you don't have any dreams. He cannot exceed your expectations if you don't have any expectations. And here's the proverb: where there is no vision, the people perish. That's Proverbs 29:18. God cannot help you to meet your goals and your dreams if you haven't set them for you. So let's stop there and let's be real. Where do you see yourself emotionally? Where do you want to be in 3 months? And what are some steps that you're going to do? We will never get there if you don't write them down and create measurable goals for yourself. You can set something that you're never going to work on, or you're never going to get there, or you can set measurable goals. Where do I want to be in 3 months emotionally, in my emotional health? What do I want to be? How do I want to live? Where do I want to? What can I do to get myself in a better mind space? What can I do to learn to bring my thoughts captive before God. What can I do to put myself in a position where I have my eyes fixed on Him constantly? Write those down, like really make those a reality. If you need help on making goals, writing goals, write a comment. I'll try to help you out. But if you want to know a little bit more about this devotional that I'm doing, it's called Transformed. It's by Rick Warren. We did this in our small groups. It talks about your physical health, your financial health, your emotional health, and your spiritual health. And I think these are all good things for us to learn to be transformed in. But since this month is Mental Health Awareness Month, I wanted to do emotional health. So next week I'll pick another one. We'll start delving in deeper to some of these different things. And yeah, so I hope this is good for you. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them in the comment section, and I'll try to get to them as soon as I can. And if you have any prayer requests too, just put them out there. I will see you next time, everybody. You can keep an eye out for the mental health tip of the day. It's going to be coming out here pretty soon. We're just put those out there on my page, so I haven't been putting them on our church's page. I guess I should do that. But if you follow me, you can get them there, or I'll start throwing them over to our church's page too. Okay, have a great week, everybody. We'll see you later. All right, bye-bye.